Hello meatbags! Today we're going to make a very simple peach cobbler. So I started with 4 pounds of cut up peaches. So you don't have to skin them, you can just cut them up into little chunks. And then I'm going to add the brown sugar. I'm going to leave the link to this recipe in the video description, so check that out. Next is the cornstarch. So I'm adding about a tablespoon of cornstarch. This is to make the filling for the peach cobbler. Next, I use this half of a lemon to get about 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. And after I squeezed it into the cup, I just picked out any of the little seeds and measured it out. And I got lucky. It was exactly 1 tablespoon of fresh lemon juice. Not the fake stuff that's in the bottle. You deserve better than that. Go ahead and get yourself some fresh lemon juice. And next, some nice vanilla extract. You'll also need some cinnamon, and some nutmeg, and some ground ginger. After you have everything in the bowl, mix it all together. You may have to mix for quite a while to make sure all of the cornstarch is hydrated. So just mix until you don't see any more little specks of white. I'm making this to donate to a local organization in my community. So I'm using one of these foil pans, so I can leave it at the event after everyone has hopefully eaten all of it, but I'm just using this to make it easy to transport. So this is a 13 by 9 baking dish, and I'm going to spray it with some non-stick spray just to make sure everything is a little bit easy to scrape out when people are digging in at the community event. So now I'm going to put my cut up peaches and the seasonings, the flavorings. I'm going to put all of that into a foil pan. Make sure to get out all of the little juicy bits too. Spread it out so it is pretty evenly distributed in the pan. The recipe tells us to bake the peaches a little bit before putting the topping on. So that's just an FYI. If you follow that recipe, make sure to actually do that part. So now moving on to the topping. So for the topping, you'll need some flour and some sugar, some baking soda, some baking powder, so you do need both, some salt, and after you have the dry ingredients in the bowl, just whisk everything all together. Make sure to whisk very well so all of the dry ingredients are evenly distributed in the dry mixture. I'm going to use some Lucerne unsalted butter. So, fair warning, this butter, I also made a cake for this event, and this butter was a bit more greasy than I prefer because my the frosting for my chocolate cake. I did not film making the chocolate cake. I was super tired, but I did film making the peach cobbler, and I used the same butter. I honestly cannot recommend the Lucerne butter for frosting. If you're going to use this butter for another type of baking, just make sure it's not something that like is prominent and like people can see. So it would be okay to use it in your cake or like in the pie, but don't use it for like your crust or your frosting, where people can see if your frosting is a little greasy. And you know what? I took these things to the event and people were so gracious and nice and like loved everything, and it was so great and no one noticed but me that the frosting looked greasy. And if they did, they didn't say anything, but people ate it. It was all gone by the time I left. So but if you're just like a little bit of a type A person like I am, do not use this butter for your frosting. So now I have a stick of butter, and it is cold butter, and I have cut it into small cubes. I am now trying to find my pastry cutter. There you go. So I'm going to use that pastry cutter. You can also use a food processor. So if you have a food processor that has a pulse function, you can definitely just use that. I went the manual route. So here's my stick of butter, and each piece of butter, you're going to put it into the dry mixture and then lightly toss to separate the cubes into smaller pieces and to get flour coated on each piece of butter. Doing this makes it easier to use a manual method to like break up the butter that you'll see here in a second. But yeah, you definitely want to start with small pieces of butter, cold butter. It cannot be room temperature. This does not work if it's room temperature. It has to be cold. So you can see here that I have broken up all of my little cubes of butter and I have tossed them in the dry mixture. And now when I go to start to use this little pastry cutter thing, it's still not like super, like easy to do, honestly. If you have a food processor, just use the food processor. But if you want to do it the manual way, definitely coat the butter in the flour, and then it will make it easier to manipulate the flour and butter mixture. So you're just going to do this until the butter is very well incorporated with the flour, and the instructions say to do this until the butter appears like small peas in the flour mixture. So not homogeneous. I don't think you can get it homogeneous, but it needs to be just well incorporated. And you can see as I'm doing this, you can even see on camera how the pieces of butter are getting smaller and smaller and smaller and incorporated into the flour. So you can see here how the pieces are much smaller than they were when we first started. Be warned, that process might take about 5 minutes. So just use your good arm and your good hand to get it done. And you can kind of rake your hand through the flour mixture just to make sure that everything is mixed very nicely and that the butter is at the consistency that you need it to be. Moving on, now I'm going to make buttermilk, kinda. So I only had whole milk, and I usually don't buy a big carton of buttermilk because you use like 1 cup and then what do you do with the rest? So I am going to do like a little makeshift, a little cheat to make some buttermilk. So take your butter and then use some vinegar. You can use, this is just white distilled vinegar. You can also use lemon juice. So add a splash. You can see, I would guess that's about 2 teaspoons of vinegar or some kind of acid. I have also used lemon. If you use vinegar or lemon, doesn't really matter. You just need an acid to help the whole milk begin to coagulate, and it will perform in a similar way chemically as buttermilk. So I put the buttermilk aside to give it some time to start to coagulate, and then I moved on to my egg wash. So the egg wash is 1 egg with about 1 to 2 tablespoons of water, and you just beat until it is pretty homogeneous and thin. It needs to be thin enough to spread. Moving back over here to my flour mixture. If you need this kind of buttermilk hack, I recommend just doing that before you start to mix the flour mixture. But I did it this way and it also worked out just fine. So you pour in your buttermilk and stir it into the flour and butter mixture until it creates like a shaggy dough. You may have to kind of stir and press to really make sure that the flour is all hydrated, but as you can see, it will eventually come together. So I set my timer for 10 minutes. So I have my peaches. So the peaches cook for about 10 minutes, and during that time, you will make the topping. I stirred my peaches, and as you can see, they're hot and they're getting soft, but they're not juicy. And if you love peach cobbler, you probably love it for the juicy part, right? It's not just about the peaches. It's not just about the topping. So I noticed that my peaches were not giving off the juicy parts. I don't know if I just had some kind of sad, dry peaches. And so I added some water. So I started by adding about 1/4 cup of water, and then I added a little bit more. I recommend stirring your peaches and doing this because the recipe, I don't know what kind of peaches this lady had when she made this recipe, but mine were sad. Like, I don't know, maybe it's my bad, or maybe there's some issue with the recipe, but either way, if your peaches are a little bit dry, add some water and just stir it in very well. And you can add a teeny bit more sugar if you like to kind of offset adding extra liquid, but add a little bit more until it's a little bit more juicy than you'd want your final product to be. So you can see I've added and stirred, added and stirred, and added and stirred. If you are a longtime viewer of our channel, you know that it is easier to add than to take away. So don't just dump in like 2 liters of water. Add a little bit, stir, see what the deal is. Add a little bit, stir, see what the deal is. And so that's what I did. So I added the water until it was a little bit more juicy than I would want the finished product to be. And now I'm moving on to adding the topping. I am using a cookie scoop to somewhat make the little biscuits look uniform. I am just doing this because I thought the finished product would look pretty. And again, since I am giving this to a local organization where I volunteer, I really want the people who eat it to feel loved and cared for. She brought us some really nice looking desserts. People eat with their eyes before they eat with their mouths. So the presentation part was very important to me. So I will just put the little biscuit topping in scoops on top of the now juicy peaches. I didn't quite have enough to make all of the rows perfectly in 3s, but I was not going to waste the last little bit either. So this is what I ended up with. Now I'm going to take my egg wash and use my silicone brush, whatever kind of cooking brush you have, just use that to dab the egg wash on top of the little biscuits. If you can, do not skip this step because it will make the biscuits like really brown and shiny, and that will also contribute to it looking really nice. If you do not have a pastry brush, I think this one is like from Walmart or Target or something, and maybe it was like $5. They're not terribly expensive, but if you do not have one, you can simply dip like 2 or 3 of your fingers in the egg wash and brush it over whatever you're baking. So your pie, your biscuits, whatever, you can use your fingers as well. And those are free. If you have them, you got them for free. Well, your mama made them for you, but for you, they were free. So you can definitely use your fingers as well. The last step is optional, but I am going to sprinkle over a little bit more of the granulated sugar. This is just plain old white sugar, and I am sprinkling a little bit on top of each of the biscuits. And the very last step is to sprinkle over a little bit of cinnamon on top of the biscuits as well. After I ate this, I would also say if you want to add a little bit of salt, just a teeny bit of salt on top of the biscuits, that would also just kick it up a notch. So I baked it until it was done, and look how pretty the biscuits kind of spread and touch each other. I'm so happy I'm doing my little mittens dance. I'm so happy with this. So if you try it, comment below, let me know what you think and how it went for you. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one, and bye.